Hello and welcome to the Alpha Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I am pleased to be joined by our Alpha expert, Dion McCormick, no relation, as well as Sarah Mitchell, who is Director of Customer Success here at Alpha Software. Today, Dion will be doing a presentation at the beginning, but we're also here to answer your questions, and you can type those questions at any point into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Dion. Are you there?
Yes, indeed. Welcome, everybody. Let's go ahead and
Fantastic.
share.
I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter, and you should see a little dialog box. And there we go.
There we go. Get rid of the format of there so we get a little space. Aha. Well, hey, thank you everybody for joining us. Week 2. I'm having a lot of fun here. Sorry, I thought I turned that off. So let's go to Do Not Disturb, make sure. There.
It's so much more exciting though when you get the
I know. There we go. Let's see if that works. I was on focus, so that obviously didn't help my focus. So anyway, thank you everybody for joining us. We really enjoy you being here. Would like to make sure that you understand we're here for you. So in our presentation on the topic I'm covering, please go ahead and go into your GoToWebinar control panel and add, put in a question there. We will be glad to try and attempt to answer those as much as humanly possible. And if you have questions about other topics, go ahead and put those in there so we can start looking at them and be prepared. And as always, you can go to guides at alphasoftware.com, Guides, and send us topics you would like us to cover. We love when we hear from you, and it really helps us guide our process for building these kind of weekly contents to do those kind of pieces there. So I guess, that's interesting. Do not disturb, and it won't even let me, stop those things. Crazy. Well, that should calm down in a moment. So again, we are here today to answer your questions, but also we have a really fun topic for today. But before I get started, I want to do a couple quick housekeeping things. One is that please check out the upcoming, and where's that? Let's see, DevCon right here. So if you go to the Alpha webinar page, a couple areas, we have our full training suite that's capable. And then also very important is DevCon. They are on sale now. They will be going up soon. So if you haven't booked your DevCon tickets, do it now. The beauty of it is it will be high quality, incredible online event. A lot of really neat stuff is being planned in episodes and seminars and other things that I think you're going to find very valuable. And you're going to walk away with very actionable information, not only on new capabilities of the Alpha platform, but more importantly, just techniques and other pieces that go from there. So jump on, go over there, sign up. We look forward to seeing you at it. The team is very, very busy putting all that together from the standpoint of getting it prepared and making sure we have a super high quality event, and it will be fully recorded. So if you have to miss 1 or 2 sessions, no worries. You'll have those available after the event in a very high quality format for you. Also an update is that I am going to be using the latest production release for today, the enhancements in terms of the storage connection strings as part of that. So make sure you go ahead, and the way you can do that is most easily just jump into the universal installer. Now, obviously it is production release. We're using that, so we feel very confident on that. But remember, you can always install it as a different version, so you don't have to work with your current environment from there. But the Alpha Universal Installer is a super powerful tool that will allow you to install new versions, other versions, etc. Really like it. It makes my life a lot easier. And I'm using, in this case, the 8099 Developer Edition, which is where these new capabilities are at. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in and talk about what we're going to talk about today. So in that case, we're going to talk about storage connection strings, which have been in the system for some time, but now have been enhanced for some new platforms that we're going to do a demonstration of today. And I'm very excited. I've been using storage connection strings and storage, specifically AWS3 for some time on multiple projects. It is a winner. It really does a huge amount in terms of taking load off the server, the Alpha Anywhere server, and produce a better sort of experience for your end users. So you're gonna love it. It's gonna be phenomenal. So what I would like to talk a little bit about what connection strings are, and then from there, we can then go in and show the demonstration, some of the new enhancements from there. So storage connection strings are very similar to database connection strings, meaning it's a way for you to put into your system, your alpha platform and your alpha development environment, a way to connect to external systems. So a database connection string is a way for alpha to understand how to communicate to an external database system and what kind of, the nature of that system, what kind of database it is, etc. So that allows us to do things like MongoDB and other NoSQL at the same time. Well, storage connection strings are very similar. There are a number of different cloud storage solutions out there. And the ones I'm pointing here are AWS, Azure, Google Drive, and Dropbox. Those are just 4 of the examples. There's actually a whole new host of sort of AWS S3 compatible ones too that are out there also really nicely. So these are, basically big data centers that will store all your objects. And I like it a lot. I use it an enormous amount, mainly because it takes the load off the server. Meaning before, traditionally, I would have a server, and on that server, I would have a file system, and I'd upload and download and store files on there for my applications. And that worked fine. And it still is supported today. Absolutely, you can work it. Some people actually store their files in the database system. I hear pros and cons on that. There's some neat things you can do, but generally the world has gone to store your files outside of your database system for your application. Now, there's a primary reason for that. When you store your files on these external systems, they start picking up the load. Specifically, for instance, let's say I upload a file to Amazon S3 and it gets into an S3 bucket there. It gives me back a URL that I can use, and that can be protected. So you can make that either public or not. So there's ways to protect your data on the cloud-based systems. But what's really neat about it is that if I give that URL through the application to the person using the app, or in my file download, I tell it to use the Amazon S3 system and go directly there, then when the actual file transfer occurs, the alpha server is kind of out of the middle. It kind of says, it like wipes its hand, walks away and says, you guys handle this. And so literally the browser and the S3 system are doing all the work. And so Amazon S3 is doing all the work of getting that file, transporting it down, making sure it's good, etc. from there. So now I can have higher performance because my server's not sitting there trying to manage a big file download or a bunch of file downloads. It basically has handed that off to the cloud storage solution, and it allows you to do that. So that's a huge advantage right there from the standpoint of using these cloud storage, because they do the work. Your server can then handle more transaction volume, more users, because they're not dealing with these file download pieces there. Now, there's a second very cool reason for it, and then there will be a third cool reason for it. So it's reason number 2 is that in all of these file systems or file storage solutions, they have a huge amount of really cool features. Specifically, one that's off the top of my head is that on AWS S3, it can basically create a history and archive all of your quote unquote files or objects, documents. So let's say I upload a document like, weekly report 123. And I put that on Amazon S3. And then I go, I wanted a new version of that weekly report. So, and it has the same file name and stuff I want to put in the same location. You can enable something on S3 where when I upload that object to S3, it archives that. Instead of just deleting it outright, it archives it. And now I can go in down the road. If I ever have a problem, I can have a complete archive of that. And that's all handled automatically. There's no performance penalty. You just set a setting on it, and you're done, which is really cool because then you don't have to worry about, managing, archiving files, etc. And that's another benefit too, is, Amazon S3, even though they have had a couple instances in the last year where they've had interruptions for short periods of time, it's a very rock solid system. I trust them more not to lose my files than I would lose them myself. And so therefore my Alpha servers can be smaller, more focused, and I can also use things like Alpha Cloud, because then I don't have to worry about where am I going to put my files. I can launch my app on Alpha Cloud and put everything on S3 and everything works perfectly. And I don't have to worry about any updates to my system, etc. Now there's a third, and I actually think it's the most interesting one and the one we're really starting to kind of unwrap at this time. And that is, a lot of these systems also provide other facilities for them. And so I'm going to focus today on Dropbox, but Google Drive kind of has similar features, Azure does. They all kind of are fighting for feature parity, but I've been using Dropbox forever. It's my favorite little tool just because it's so easy for me to upload a file, get a link to it, give it to someone else, I'm done kind of scenario. and it handles a lot of synchronization for me automatically. So it's just a really go-to system that I use. But in Dropbox, they have an enormous amount of cool features. So for instance, and I'm going to go in here, just go to dropbox.com. I am logged in here, but I can actually go to the home page. So let's go, let's go. I won't go actually home. Let's go to the actual website real quick. Hopefully that won't keep going. It's going to keep making me go here. But there are things like, for instance, file requests, where you can go on and you can send a request to someone and they get a link, and then they can upload that file to a specific location on your system. I can also send files out securely and other pieces like that. So there's all these kind of business, kind of nice to use tools. Even has things like e-signature and stuff like that. I haven't played much with that. But the cool thing is now I can blend those features and capabilities with Alpha into sort of a holistic system. So now I can add all these really cool features to my applications without actually having to go code them inside my application. And we'll talk a little bit more about from there. So think of these as a whole set of functionality that's available to your app beyond just internally what you do there. And they also have a full suite of APIs that go around these tools. The connection string is really focused on file upload, download management aspects, but there's no reason why you can't use Alpha's built-in API generation capability to talk to Dropbox and trigger certain activities and things like that. So you could really create a very blended environment between Alpha and, say, Dropbox, gather all these really cool features and use them in your app, and the users never have to know what's going on behind the scenes. You know, it kind of, you're using Dropbox almost like an extended part of your capability there. So I'm very excited about that. That's kind of where the world goes. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to do a quick demonstration just to get you familiar with how the process works. We can talk a little bit about Dropbox connectivity, how we set that up. We're going to talk about reading files from Dropbox and writing and uploading files to Dropbox from there. And this is just scrapes the surface. There's a whole lot of other features that are available within Alpha. Things like you could call and make things copy, duplicate. I mean, there's a lot of really cool things in there, but I want to go from there. So the concept, and I'm sure some people here have already used Amazon S3. The super important thing you got to understand is that there's a little bit of setup that needs to be done before all the pieces fall in place. And as I mentioned, make sure if I go too fast on something or I miss an interesting element, please pop in and ask me questions on there. We'll go through them. Real quick audio, video check, everything going okay for you there?
Okay, Dion.
Okay, cool. Let me adjust my mic while I'm using that. Cool. Then of course, the moment I touch my mic, it will go south and you won't hear me again. So the first thing you need to do is inside Dropbox, they have a developer section. So you can see dropbox.com/developers. And for Alpha to be able to talk to Dropbox, you need a set of credentials. And this is where you go in and set up those credentials. And there's a couple different ways you can set up the credentials. And I'm not going to go through all the details today. I'm going to use the very simple one called a token, but there are other more sophisticated ways you can set this up so that Dropbox says, hey, this person's calling me. Is it legitimate or not? That person calling them is going to be your application, not the user, but the application on your Alpha application. So the first thing you need to do is go in and set up your credentials. And I've already gone in and set up a set of credentials for what's called Alpha Webinar. I'm going to jump in there. And basically, you set up a set of credentials. Very important as they consider development versus production. So there's some elements there. This supplies the ability of many more abilities than we use, but just to give a feel for what it works from there. So, who's going to be use this? If you have a team of developers, you can set that up there. You can give them types of scopes. In this case, this is called an app folder where it generated an application folder on Dropbox for me, and that's where I'm going to be able to access it. The nice thing about that is that you could have multiple of these for different clients with different credentials, so you can ensure you're never going to have a problem with someone getting someone else's files by accidentally putting it into the wrong location. Is basically you could set up a set of credentials for, let's call this client 1 app and the other one's client 2 app. They will use separate credentials that you'll put into your system, and therefore you can be sure. So there's some really nice things you can leverage to kind of provide that safety and security that you want from there. I just gave it a app folder name, and this is what's going to be stored up on Dropbox. And then here's the important, when you create this, it creates an app key and a secret. These are secret codes you can use, and these are mainly when you do API work, you need this information here. I'm not going to show it because you don't want to show your secret, although you can always reset it from there. We're not using OAuth 2, which is where a person, like, you'll have someone on their browser, they'll say, oh, enter your Dropbox credentials and stuff like that. We're kind of setting this up as sort of a server-to-server deal, so I don't need to do all those things. But I did do this here, which is generate access token. That's what I'm going to be showing today, is an access token. And I'm going to highlight that is basically it creates a token that I can then use to call, and it then says, oh yeah, that's a valid token from that standpoint there. And and we'll talk a little bit more. There's short-lived tokens, long-lived tokens. You can kind of use a mix and match depending on what you want to do from there. So this is a very straightforward. I basically created a new app, answered a few questions. It gave me the app key and app secret. I generated an access token, and I also made sure I wanted to create what my app folder name is here. And so I'm going to actually go into Dropbox real quick. And this is actually on Dropbox. And then you're going to see that in here, where is it? Application folders. Where does it show? There. Not now. Where is that? Not file request. Apps. Okay, I'm going to go right here. So when I created my Alpha Webinar application inside here, it created a folder called apps, and then in there, it created a subfolder that was called, in this case, Alpha, where is it down here? Where did I put that? Right here, folder name. And you can call that anything you want. So it can be up to you on how to do it. And it creates that folder for me. And so now when I'm interacting with Dropbox through the API or through the name connection strings, I'm not hitting my basic, I'm hitting right here, which is critical from that standpoint there. And we'll come back and look at that in a few moments here. So step one, and this is similar to Google Drive. Their screens are different, but the concepts are the same. You go to Google, you set up a set of credentials, you get those credentials, and then you can come into Alpha and connect the two together. And again, there's excellent step-by-step instructions in the documentation provided by the development team and Sarah. So literally I followed that along, and it was like a 5-minute process, and I had everything worked first time. It was great. It was an excellent experience in terms of going for there. So I've got my credentials. In my case, I've got my token. So now I'm going to go back into Alpha, and my next step is to connect Alpha, or let Alpha know how to talk to Dropbox. So as you've done many times before, under the tools menu, we have searched and used the Alpha DAO connection strings. This is, again, where I can connect to databases. In this case, I don't have any databases in my particular demonstration, and I will be glad to send these over to you. So you can have a copy of this UX, just drop us a line on that. But you'll notice under Alpha connection strings, we have something called storage connection strings. So I'm going to open that up. And this is very similar to the database connection strings. And I've created one here called Dropbox. You can call it anything you want. That's up to you. So let me go ahead and show you how I went through that process so I can kind of show you step by step. So again, I went to Tools, Storage Connection Strings. I'm going to click New. I'm going to call it Dropbox Webinar. Okay, it says put in the connection string. Thank goodness, I don't have to memorize all how that works. All I have to do is click build. And by the way, one of the more popular ones that are getting more and more popular, mainly because how popular the Azure platform is SharePoint connection strings. And they actually have a genie that will walk you through that stuff. And I didn't have it on my list there, but I kind of bundle that in Azure. But that, for people who are doing Microsoft stuff, it's awesome. It makes your life really easy. And I have one client who does it, and they just love it. They're combining all their SharePoint document stores in with their Alpha app, and it works perfectly. So I'm going to click build. So in this case, I pick the provider. And as you can see, we have a bunch here. Oh, there's eucalyptus. I didn't even see that one. Wasabi. Oh, Wasabi, by the way, check that out. So Amazon S3 was kind of the pioneer of this. And they really kind of built the concept around this object store, i.e. document store in the cloud. And it works really well, but not the cheapest service in the world. So there's another company called Wasabi that has created a sort of a clone of S3, but their pricing is much more aggressive, but they're completely compatible with Amazon S3, meaning all their APIs work the same. So in this case, it works similar to that. So check out Wasabi as one of the potential if you're just using for a really good priced object store on there. But I like Dropbox because of all the features it provides. Okay, so I can see there's Dropbox. I just have to paste in my token and I'm done. And there's a difference between short-lived and in terms of that, I'm going to use kind of a short-lived one just because this is a demonstration. And then you can test it after you've inserted your token that they give you there. You just paste it in here, you're done. Now, as I mentioned before, they have there's just some really good information about doing this. And this is different for each system you're going to connect to. So as you can see, it's going to show you and walk you through exactly how to do everything here, and it's all built in. So you don't have to worry about trying to figure it out. They'll walk you through all those pieces from there. Okay, so actually, let me close the door real quick. So I'm going to go back here, cancel here. I'll go into this one right here. As you can see, real simple, Dropbox, and here's the token I'm going to use for today. I refreshed it this morning, so I have a good one. And after this is over, it will not work. So no tricky stuff down there. Once I've done that, much like the database connection string, I say before I do any development or anything, I want to make sure it works. So of course, I click test connection, and I make sure it says connection succeeded. If it doesn't, just make sure you've pasted the connection token in there correctly, and that you've set up your, as per the instructions, the Dropbox side of it from there. But once you're done there, you now have a connection string, it's in your system, and you're good to go. Very excited. So now we can actually do some fun development. So let's go ahead and jump in to it. But before I do jump into the actual using of it, and this contains a little code just because of the way it works it, but I want to see if there were any questions or anything like that.
We do have a question on storage connection strings, but actually I want to hold it until after you've gone through this because you might get to it.
Yeah, you got it. So I've got a really simple little demonstration here just to give you a feel for how of it. And so I've got a UX here. I've got get files, which will call Dropbox, get a list of files and put it in this file here, and then file upload, which will allow me to actually upload something onto there. So let's go ahead and do get files. And so, I've got my debugging there, but oh my God, that was so exciting. Wasn't that there? It actually is. This is pretty amazing. So this is telling me that I have 2 files up on my my Dropbox store, 2 files here. So let me go over here. Let's go into here, and there are those 2 files right here. Boom, within there. So hey, you know what? Let's upload another file here. Let's grab another file here, and I'm in the Dropbox app here, just to kind of show how this works here. So we'll go Dropbox, and then let's go down to drawer damage and open that. Okay, so now we have in our app folder another one here. And let me get the files, run it, and you'll see now it's bringing back 3 files, earth-shattering. But this is kind of cool from the standpoint of, you noticed I didn't actually have to upload all my files through my interface. They could be uploading it on their, let's say the company has a Dropbox file that's already used. We can set it all up and they can use their regular day-to-day Dropbox files. That could be conceivably be synced down to a machine for having it local and being pushed there. So you can get this blended environment where now I can have access to Dropbox and see what's inside there and be able to extract it. And then the other thing that's cool is once I have sort of the list of files, I can download them, I can email them, I can do any number of things with it. I can manipulate them locally, etc. They give me a link to where that file is, and I'm off to the races from there. And I'm going to talk a little bit. There's a full suite of XBasic capabilities built into Alpha that allow you to interact with cloud storage kind of scenarios. It's a genericized, and that's what I use from there. Now, that said, let me go into live preview. Let me start my server. Okay, so I'm going to get my files. I should really get rid of that debug. But I've got my files here. I'm going to go ahead and click File Upload. Notice I have to be in live preview. I'm going to click my upload functionality here. Let's go to pictures. I think, I've got the same ones there. Let me see if I got something more interesting. There, I'll do the test PDF. How about that? Okay, so I'm going to upload. I could upload more than one. I'm going to click Upload, and I'll walk you through that in a moment. Okay, So let's get the files and check that out. Sorry, again, it's popping up XBasic. I left that in for walking through it, which we'll do in a few moments. But notice when I click Lit Files, it's actually going up there and it's now showing, oh yeah, I've got 4 files up there because it's uploaded that test PDF to Dropbox. And I went over to Dropbox and guess what shows up? I didn't even have to refresh the screen. It has webhooks and other things like that. And I can click on this and see what that looks like and use it and send it to people, you know. They have other things called like workflows you can create on these Dropboxes so that, like, for instance, when a new file comes in, it could do a whole bunch of other things with it. The sky is literally the limit in terms of what you can do with it. And as I mentioned before, it tracks history, downloads, everything else. You can set up access to this to other people. Again, you can do that through the API. That's beyond the scope of today's. But as you can see, it's pretty straightforward to do both getting the files and uploading the files. So what I'm going to do is walk you through the code. It's not very much. There is a little code in here. What's neat is that there's going to be, and I know this is on the roadmap, is more and more integration with the UX components so that you do a little less coding to handle certain things here. And I know that's on the list for the team to kind of enhance that. For instance, the drag and drop functionality and other pieces that are within the system there. But let's walk through and just show you how straightforward this is. So remember, I've got my file results here, and then I have a button here called Get Files. And in this case, I'm just running a little XBasic callback to run a little code that will call Dropbox, get those file names, and then insert them into that result file. That's all this does here is basically when you click that button, it calls my XBasic callback function. So I'll go over here to XBasic functions, and I'm going to go to Get Files. And you can see it's an enormous amount of coding. I mean, once I understood it, you know, as I'm all kidding aside, basically this is the little helper function that's built into Alpha. It is one of many, and I'm going to show you that in a moment here. But basically all I have to do is say, hey, call this function A5 storage list items and give it my Dropbox. And remember that Dropbox is the name of my storage connection string. So if I had 2 or 3 of these, I could mix and match. You're not limited to one within the system here. That returns a set of results, and all I do is then I set the value of the results folder on, or not folder, but text area on the screen. So let me show you that in operation. Now the debug will actually be handy instead of just annoying. Okay, so here I'm on result. I can step it, and you can see the result is just a character return line feed set of files, and I say, hey, grab that data and put it in there. But now I could do anything I want with this. I could, you know, step through each of those files, look at their names, find out what they are, maybe do downloads, anything else, and I'll show you that in a moment. But there's a whole host of features you can do now that you have not only the connection to Dropbox, but also access to the files there. And also you could do things like this. You could write a routine that runs every once in a while that is monitoring a folder, a Dropbox folder. When people put stuff into that folder, you could be processing it and then executing it on a periodic basis. I'd probably put this behind our own API or something like that. So for instance, I could write a little, you know, cron job basically that says, you know, upload, when someone uploads something to here, go ahead and periodically look and see if there's any new files in there and then process them as you see fit. The other thing, as I mentioned, is there's some really cool things like file requests where you could say the person could send out a file request and then that file request could come back into that folder and then you could be monitoring that folder. So a lot of really fun opportunities you can do. And that's really all the code is there. Now, let's grab this and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go into my browser and I'm going to go into the fabulous. Okay. So here is, and I'm going to go ahead and link this and put it into the chat real quick for everybody. Is that right? I think that should be it. Yep, there we go there. So there are a number of different functions and they all start with A5 storage. And this is that library that was created by the development team that's sort of a generic storage management. So it doesn't matter if you're using Wasabi, S3, Azure, SharePoint, or this, all of these understand how to talk to those systems and handle it from there. So the one I'm using here is something called A5 storage list items. And you can see it gives you a connection string is what we give it, but it has some cool optional parameters. For instance, you can do a search prefix, which means only give me files that have a certain search prefix. So that allows you to actually search a folder and figure out. And then you can return p result, which will be populated with information about the object. So you can get, there's a whole bunch of extra data that comes back, metadata associated with that from there. But really straightforward, and there's great examples here. Here's your storage connection string, and then I just do it, and then boom, here comes the properties. You can see the properties come back. It tells you how long it took, how many items are in there, and then the actual images are these pieces here. And it even handles things, for instance, S3 doesn't have folders, but there's like where it's actually located in there, because it may be in a subfolder kind of scenario from there. But you can see what's really exciting. There are other ones, which I'll show you in a moment. Save file, save data. You can get an item properties, which you can call a specific object and get that. But you could also get that item as a file to download it. You can also copy that file, which is really neat. So if, let's say, you wanted to copy a file, you could actually tell it on S3 or Dropbox, take this file, rename it, copy it here, and it all happens on that store. And again, you never have to download the stuff to be able to do this, because the system, i.e. S3 or whatever, will handle it for you. So you leverage your server even more and more from there. And of course, you can delete items too. Once you've processed them, you can call back and do a delete item from there. So these are your go-to functions that allow you to interact with it. And as I mentioned, the Alpha team will be building more and more of these functions, well, not these functions, but building more into the user interface controls, the ability to talk to these systems so you don't have to do any kind of work if you don't want to, which we rather simplify your life and do it from there. Now, what I'd like to do is in our demonstration, you'll notice also that I can do an upload. And I had to do it in live preview because upload is not allowed in working preview. But basically, I click file upload, it brings up the standard upload feature, and I go from there. So let's look at how we did that. Now, in this case, I'm using file upload. That's the button there. And I'm using a pre-made action JavaScript called file upload user define. Now, let me go in here and see. There are other file uploads, just to let you know. So this is file upload. Oh, that's when you have a control there. So this is one method I use. There are other methods, but this is the one I used, file upload user define. So let me go in there. A few things I've said is allow multiple files, gives you the ability to do things like tell you how big the file will be, all this aspect, gives you a progress report, tab bar, maximum combined number of files. So you have a lot of control over, someone can't just blow out a whole bunch of files, or maybe you do want them to allow to gather a whole bunch of files and do them up at the same time. And then you'll notice there's some other options here in terms of the window title that shows up. And most importantly down here is this right here. That's basically saying that once Alpha's taking care of the file stuff, it handles all the work for you. It does tell you then, okay, you can now call a server-side function like an XBasic function, and I will go ahead and after I'm done doing my work, I'll hand it off to you, and I'm going to give you some information about what just happened. That way I have ability to do something with it. So very important is the XBasic function arguments in array mode. It gives you all this details to show you for every file that was uploaded, it gives you basically an array you can walk through from there. And I'm not going to go through all this. I'm not going to go through the details. I will show you some sample code to show you it's not very hard at all. But the important thing here is that all this information is available to your XBasic, so you can manipulate and understand what happened to each file, etc., and get the information from there. By the way, there's two options. One is file name, which I like. It just gives me the file name of the file that was uploaded, then I can manipulate it. You also have something called data, where it can actually give you pointers to the data that was uploaded from that standpoint. So again, I add this XBasic callback. I put in these parameters. It takes care of popping up the window, letting the user select it, hit the button, go up there, all those kind of pieces there. And then I can then run this function to do a post-processing of what I want from there. So, and then last but not least, you'll see before upload, offload. Now, this is very important. You'll notice in here, nowhere do I mention like what service I'm file uploading to, meaning this is merely a tool that will allow the person to select files on their local system. They can then, those files are temporarily uploaded and given to the Alpha server, and then I can then do something with it. So my code is actually moving it onto that. Now, this isn't the most optimal solution. I'd rather have it go right to S3 and then give me the list back, but those kind of features are coming down the road in terms of enhancing the different ways to upload files. Because when Amazon S3 was the first one, there's a lot of capabilities, and I'll show you an example of that in a few moments. But again, set this up, it takes care of all the hard work for me. Then it goes, hey, I've got all the files ready for you. I'm gonna call this function, you can handle it here. And again, you can do client-side functions in terms of before the upload, after, just make sure everything's good. You can run a little JavaScript to do other things from there. And you'll notice down here, there's a lot of information regarding how this works, like creating the function prototype, etc. This one's very, and I'll come back to this, is contrasting with this file load, Amazon S3 or Alpha server. That one does a little bit more work for you, which is kind of nice, and that will be extended to other ones in the near future. So let's go ahead and go in and look at the code. So after I click this, select the files, it then runs my process files function. As you can see, it's not very much. I don't do a lot of stuff. Basically, remember, it is giving me in the E variable that array of information. So let me go back here. This is easier to show you. And let's go down here. Yeah, okay. So you can see that it gives me an array of files, and then I can get from there, for instance, the data, the file name, the data type, etc. So this is all handled. So it comes in under the thing E file array I, and I just means one to many, however many that were uploaded. So I basically just use this right out of the box. I'm going right here to my XBasic functions. So it gives me that array. I'm going to do a for loop here, basically to walk through that file. Notice I have the file count, so I know how many files were uploaded by the user. That's all handled, and it says, oh, I've got everything ready to go, and hands it to me. So I do a few things. First thing I do is I want that file name, because I want to use the exact same file name up on S3, or I'm sorry, Dropbox. You don't have to do it this way. You could actually rename it, which is kind of handy in certain situations. Maybe you want to have a user-friendly name and then actually use a unique name on the other one there. I'm getting the file path. This is where it is temporarily at. So basically Alpha gets it off the client machine, puts it in a location for me. And then item name I'm giving, and then MIME type is the type of it. And again, these are optional, you don't really need to it. And then I'm using one of those functions, in this case, A5 storage save file. Really straightforward. It basically says, what connection string, in this case, Dropbox, where is the file now? And that's that temporarily, where it put it temporarily. What do you want to call it? In this case, I'm going to call it file name. So I want to call it the exact same name that was on my local system. And then I think this is MIME type. I leave that alone because it's not necessary for this situation. And then PR is basically the results, and that after it does this, it gives me a bunch of information. I'm not doing anything with that, but it does give me other information that I can use later on if I wanted to, say, update a database with some other information or do some logging of this activity. So very straightforward. Basically, I loop through the files, I grab the file name and the file path, and then basically just say, hey, take that file path and put it up on, in this case, Dropbox with this file name. Now, the cool thing about this is this same code will work exactly the same with Google, with S3, with any of them, because Alpha's kind of genericized these pieces. That's A5 storage save file. It understands when it's talking to Dropbox, well, how do I talk to Dropbox to actually move this file and do it? And it could be completely different from Amazon, from Google. You don't have to worry about any of that from there. You just say, hey, do it for me, and we've abstracted all of that complexity out, so you don't have to worry about that from there. One last thing I want to show you is that another really nice thing is drag. There was a cool function that was added a while back called drag and drop file upload. And the neat thing about this is that it actually does two things. One is it's a file uploader. You can select files one by one, but it also offers the ability to put an area on your screen where you can drag and drop stuff. Now this is currently you can use this, but let me go ahead and go into here. Here's the drag and drop properties, but let's go into the file upload. Currently, it really only supports the server, Amazon S3 or Amazon S3 indirect. Now, since it works with the server, it has the same concept where it will move the stuff to the server and then give me that information. Then I can move it up to Dropbox. So I can use this technology if I wanted to, and it would work basically the same as the older Dropbox or older upload functionality. So you can use this with these other ones. The nice thing is that if you're using S3, you can see it has the ability to talk directly to S3, so you don't have to write all that other code, which is kind of nice. And again, will be expanded, I think, in the near future to handle the other interfaces. So once I've done this, then I can then just say, well, we're on S3, do it all within the control. I don't have to write that XBasic. And there's actually two. Oh, by the way, this does support Wasabi because Wasabi mimics the S3. So if you're using either S3 or Wasabi, you don't have to create any code from there. Now you'll notice there are two options. There's Amazon S3 and S3 Indirect. S3 uploads it right to Amazon. So it goes literally from the browser the person's working with right onto Amazon S3 or Wasabi. No touching, no working with, etc. But you can also tell it to please go through Alpha and there. And there are different use cases why you may want to do that. I really like this one because, again, the Alpha server is out of the business. It just says, great, take care of it. When you're done, you're done. Everything's great from there. But you may want to, have some other manipulation before it actually goes on to S3. This gives you that. Now, that's not to say that after upload complete, let's see what it says. Yep. So that's not to say you can't also, after it goes from the browser to Amazon S3 or Wasabi, you can actually run a after upload complete XBasic function, and it will tell you what's been uploaded. So I can do that same kind of post-processing we talked about here. So lots of flexibility. I use this almost exclusively now because it's so much, it's just nicer, and people love the ability to drag and drop files because they can pick up 10 files from their desktop, drop it on there, and just goes boom, 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 up on S3. And then I can then record that information or do anything in a post basis. So I tend to use this control a lot. The only reason I kind of start with the other one is I wanted to show you the traditional and how you would use the XBasic to actually then move the files. And again, as I mentioned, you can use this if you like. So just use server, and then on the server, you can then move it and then delete it off your local server. So, and from a performance standpoint, yeah, it's gonna take a little bit longer, but the speeds between the servers and S3 is so fast that you're not going to see a big performance hit from that standpoint. So again, once I do the file upload, all I do is get the list of files, file name, then iterate through them, save them there. And then if I wanted to, these are in temp file uploaded, so they will automatically be deleted by the server. It goes into the temp area of the server. You could, if you want, since you know the file path, you could literally say, okay, delete that file right now from a security standpoint if you want to. It's really up to you on how you handle it. So that's a quick and interesting, hopefully, I guess I shouldn't talk about that, discussion about storage connection strings. They're super easy to set up. You just have to know how to set up the credentials. They're used to connect to many different ones. Once that you have set up your connection strings, the different functions are abstracted, so you don't have to worry about the complexities of how they handle files, etc. There are built-in features inside Alpha, not only XBasic functions, but also some very powerful user interface functions that are available that you can, like that drag and drop, to use to support this kind of stuff. And as you can see, we support a wide range of them, really probably the 95% of what most people are using, including on Azure, the SharePoint, which, if you know, there's tons of SharePoint out there. SharePoint's been out for a long time. A lot of people set up systems on there. So having the ability to integrate with SharePoint on a file basis is really powerful because all these people have file libraries and you can leverage that on your solution. So it's kind of a cool feature to have in there. So with that, I'm going to hush for a moment, see if there are any questions and or any other questions. So.
Excellent. Yes, there are. So I'll just read the question straight out, which is, I've seen several videos for how to upload to AWS S3, but nothing for how to download from AWS S3. And of course, my project invoking the JavaScript download action fails miserably. It seems to do nothing. So how do you download?
It's like the Roach Motel. You can check in
anytime you want.
Check out. Okay, so the way to do that is they have a really nice thing. So I'm going to put in a button here. Okay, button, and I'll go download. and I'll go in here and I'll go file, and then there's a file download, and you can see in here you have Amazon S3 built into here. So the neat thing is this file download button allows you to go directly to S3 and download it, or the server kind of scenario. You could also write your own little Ajax callback and run like how I kind of did there, but I really like the S3. Once I set that up here, basically I specify my credentials. I talk about how I'm going to connect, which I don't have a connection string. Obviously this won't work there because this is S3 specific. And then do you want to give it an explicit object name in terms of what you want to download it at? And that's it. This is how I do it. So I put a button on my screen with that, and then I can, basically download the items from there with the Amazon S3 storage from within the system. It's pretty straightforward and pretty easy to do.
Excellent. So then the follow-up question is, can you pull items from storage, in other words, download them, but instead of maybe just, saving them into a browser, have it so that it attaches it to an email and sends out an email?
Yes, that's a great idea. That's a perfect example of that. So the answer is, yeah. So I would use the A5. Where is it? Where to go? Oh, right here. Okay, so you can get the list items, and then you can actually, here's one of the coolest things ever, and this is actually where things are going to. You can actually, and this is more on Amazon S3, you can get a URL from S3 and just include it in your email to someone. So you don't actually need to attach anything to it. When they click on that link, it will download the file to their local system. So that's kind of a nice thing, because then you don't have to download it, put it on your system. That said, you can actually get the A5 storage save file. So very similar to what we have is that let me go up here. Where's my storage? Where is the file at? And I believe it's, let's see, which is it? Location. Yeah, file item. And then this will save. So basically similar to my other thing, you can actually say, call it, go get this and save it as my local file here. Then, and let's duplicate this. I'm going to go up here. And there you can use any mail service you want, but let's see if I can find it real quick. I'll use this one as an example. So then once you have that, which one should we show? There's like 20 different email sends. I think it's this one here, the send to. Yep. Okay. Let's see, where's the full one? There we are. Okay, so really straightforward. You can use this email, and notice there's the ability to say attachments. So the way I would do that is, if you could download that to a folder on your S3 server or on your Alpha server. You would then record that file path on your server, and then you can then create your message and say attach this file. And what will happen is it will attach it and send it to the person as if like a human created an email and attached it. And you can have more than one attachment. You don't have to have a single attachment from there. And all of the different email clients support this. So you just have to take that step of first grabbing the file you want off Dropbox, saving it locally, and going from there. Alternatively, you could I think there's an API to get a Dropbox link and get it from there, but I'd have to look into that a little bit more. But if you're using S3, you can just get the URL to that file, not even include it, just include the URL in the body of the message, and then boom, you don't even have to send attachments, which could be very nice when you have very large attachments. You don't want to have, send a 1 gigabyte file to someone through email. It's just not going to work, or even a 30 or 40, 50 gigabyte file. I'm sorry, megabyte. Certain limitations, you can just send them links from that standpoint there. So that's how I would approach it, is basically grab the file you want to send, save it locally. And again, this is temporary because once the email is out, it's actually attached to the email. So this one, this could be just a temporary file location on your server so that it gets deleted later down the road when it's doing house cleaning. And then you just attach it. Once the email's out successfully, the attachment is actually part of the email, so you don't have to worry about it living on the server originally. So that's how I'd approach doing the sort of email send as attachment. Really easy, straightforward. And as I said, there's a whole bunch of email functions here.
There
So
are,
let's
and that
see.
one in particular, I think, was a desktop one. So there are, but there are other ones as well. And
Yeah, I use
if you're going to use the
I
one
use
for Gmail,
Starpost.
yeah, exactly. We tend to use services for doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
there was
if I
another
just go down there,
question. Oh yeah, go ahead.
there's just same thing. You get MS attachments,
Yep.
and it would be a comment on the list of the local file name there. So you notice there's one file here, another file here. It's going to attach both those files and send them out. Okay, sorry, spoke over you.
So the other, oh no, not at all. The other thing that was pointed out is, so that last email function, which you correctly pointed out what the right one is. Let's see, there was another question here.
SendGrid's really good too. It's owned by Twilio.
SendGrid. Yeah, and I was about to say, actually, your suggestion of sending the link to the download is really what's being done more and more in modern applications. Oh yeah, here's the question here. The question was, can it also invoke, and I don't think it can. Can it invoke like an Outlook client on the machine? I'm not sure Outlook. I know when you have a link, like a mail to link as a href in your HTML, you can specify things like who it's going to and things like that. I'm not positive you'd be able to specify an attachment. I just don't think that's supported in HTML5. So
well, it's just you think how that could be. It could say, oh yeah, grab all your bank account statements and attach them.
Yeah, so yeah, I think really, I mean, this is usually done using a service. So if it's Spark Post or Mandrill,
that is true.
Whatever we do is definitely the way to do it. The other thing is someone was pointing out, okay, does this have to do with, can you tell us a little bit about a public bucket, private bucket, whatever, what is needed for, is there a way to authenticate this so that the bucket isn't, wide open when you're using these commands?
Yeah, so when you set up, and that's kind of an interesting element, is that when you set up your connection strings, you're basically pointing to something up on that surface. So you notice in this case, it's pointing to a specific app folder. So it doesn't go to my direct for security purposes there. When you set up Amazon S3, you're going to be pointing to a specific bucket up on their server, wherever that server happens to be. Now, there's a couple things that are important about that. And let me go into here. Let me build another connection string. Is that where? No. The course setting. That's the most trickiest part about this, is that if you are you don't worry about sharing those files outside of your application, it's pretty straightforward. Basically, you will put in here your access key, your secret key, etc., and then the system will allow you to upload into that and then read that data back and forth. If you want, there is one element called the CORS, CORS. That's cross something around
Cross origins. Oh, okay. I don't know.
Basically, it allows the browser to call directly to S3 without going through your server. And so it's just a semi-anonymous. So you have to set up your the proper core setting so that this thing works correctly. And that's the tricky part. Let me go ahead and go into here. And there's a lot of really good documentation on this, on how to set up. So there's actually a link here on how to configure an S3 bucket. Let me go ahead and copy that out and put that into the here. So this is the one you need to know there. So there's a couple elements. One is you got to set up your course configuration, because this allows you to tell Amazon S3 that how people are going to talk to that bucket. So that's a tricky thing, and it tells exactly what is going on here to configure that. It allows you to make callbacks to a different server than the server from which the page was originally loaded there. So that is important. So it allows your like if you're doing direct files directly from AWS from the client on the person's browser, well, that's going directly to them, not through the Alpha server. So you have to give permissions to do that. The other element is on Amazon S3, you have to set permissions. So you can set a bucket as public, but that's highly not really recommended, because anybody could, if they knew sort of the unique URLs, they could go surf and try and check your bucket and look for stuff. And they encourage you not to do that. So one way is you, instead of doing, you can download it and insert a link or attach the file. There's a bunch of different ways to handle that. Or you may want it public. You may want to upload a bunch of files, and then anybody clicks on it, you don't care. It's maybe, standard policies and procedures or marketing materials. Like, for instance, in this one project, there's a whole bunch of standardized contracts that are publicly available because they have to go through legal and they have to go through the state. So they are public documents. So we just shove it into an S3 bucket called public with those. And then we can just give anybody a URL to that bucket, to one of those contracts, and boom, we're done. That's how it goes from there. So there's two levels. One is make sure you set your course policy, especially if you're uploading data. You notice the allowed method here is put. That means uploading an object to there. Otherwise, you'll see it doesn't work properly. And then the other thing is you go in and set the actual security on it. Now, one thing that's highly recommended is when you have on S3, you're going to get a set of basically credentials for accessing S3. Once you're on there, you actually want to go into S3 and set up a special set of credentials on S3 for your application. And that's really highly recommended, because then when, if it ever gets compromised, there's sort of a limit. They don't have access to your root privileges on S3. They basically have the ability to maybe upload and download data to a specific S3 bucket. So then if you have to either cancel it or redo the password, you don't go through a huge nightmare kind of situation. And again, there's documentation on Amazon on how to do that. You set up a specific set of credentials for your application. That's when you're in here, when you're doing the storage connection stream, you'll have an access key and secret key that are just special for your app. And therefore you can put it in there, and thus your application will use those special sets of credentials. And if you ever have to invalidate them, you do them or retain them. You don't go through a whole bunch of rigmarole. So those are a couple elements to it. But again, read up on this course policy. That's number one. That's where most people get tripped up when they're doing this kind of stuff. And number two, just make sure you're setting the policy on how you anticipate people being able to access that bucket. If it's open, you want them to give them a link. You need to make sure the security is set up properly so that they can download that link. Otherwise, when they go there, they'll get this cryptic, not allowed kind of message. It looks like XML, and it's concerning, but it's protecting you and your capabilities there. Great question. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. So two quick things to touch on. The first one has to do with feature requests. Can you show, so you can, first of all, I just want to let anyone know, you can always send a feature request if you want to directly into guides, guides@alphasoftware.com. But there is a place in Alpha Anywhere for making feature requests a little bit more automated. It helps us keep organized. And it's called Send an Enhancement Request. Thanks very much. It's right there in the help menu.
You're welcome.
Of Alpha Anywhere. Would you mind going ahead and clicking on that? And this might be on a virtual machine that's not set up for email.
Oh, Sabart. Yeah, but I'll show you how I tend to do it. Just okay. So send an enhancement request. Mm-hmm. And if I click OK, it goes through. It's asking me which one. Well, I don't want to do that. So I usually, just as a backup, I go here and say use browser based. And it basically allows me to copy this and gives me the format, the email address, everything, and I copy that, paste it into my web browser, in this case Gmail, and then attach the information and send it from there. So the other one's kind of nice because it will actually trigger your Outlook if you have Outlook on that machine or whatever, or you can use it through the through your regular browser by just copying this information and make sure make sure, because it gives them information about what you're using now, because you may be on an old release and they've already done that feature. You never know.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yep.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thanks. But it's enhancement request at alphasoftware.com.
Perfect. And the last thing was, so a couple nice comments so far on your webinar here today. Well job.
Thank you.
Someone has a request though for a future webinar, and it's actually a great one. He says, I have an installation that uses the old security system. Can you guys possibly do a Wednesday webinar demonstrating how to convert the most recent security system? I happen to know that Sarah will be doing a security webinar next Wednesday. She doesn't cover that portion of it though. That's actually a great thing for us to cover, and we will be happy to take that one on. Dion, thank you very much for presenting today.
Yeah, thank you. Had a great time.
And thank you, Sarah, for being there, answering questions. Put the links in the chat window. Hope to see you all next Wednesday at our next Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. Until then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.